Hey everybody, this is Eileen McGurty. Welcome. And this is the second in a series of webinars about successful online teaching. So today we're going to be talking about making fantastic videos. And I wanted to just jump right in. Now, I talk to a lot of people about teaching online, and many of them say that they hesitate in doing that, in starting to teach online, because they really are concerned and worried about making videos. They think to themselves, oh, I don't have the right technology, or I'm a technology idiot, and even if I had the right technology, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Or I don't have any money and I think I need to hire somebody professional. A lot of people also worry about looking at themselves on film, and the idea of talking to a camera is a little nerve-wracking, which I can really relate to, because it is a little nerve-wracking if you're not used to it. So maybe you hear yourself in some of these concerns, and it's very common, so don't worry about it. And I'm here to tell you that the thing is, anybody can make an effective online instructional video. There's just a few educational principles and media production principles that you need to keep in mind, and you can make a great video. So I'm going to just jump right in with the slides. Give me a minute while I launch that. Here we go. Now I want you to think about an online instructional video that you've seen that you remember. What is it that you remember about that? What is it that you remember about that? Now, you might remember, all kinds of different things, and it could be any instructional video, a TED Talk, or maybe a course that you took or something. Doesn't matter. But I'm guessing that you probably did not remember the production value, or whether it was high def, or what kind of video it was. What you probably remember is that and so that's why we're going to start with the most important thing, which is including the education. We'll get to the media production part of it later. Principle number one, I'm going to be talking about 4 principles. Principle number 1 is make it relevant. So you really tell your students why the topic matters to them. This is especially important in the beginning. For example, I started this webinar with a list of fears that new online teachers often have about making videos. And you probably heard yourself in those fears, and it told you then that I was talking to your experience. And so making it relevant, it can happen in all kinds of ways, but telling your students why they should listen to you. You could start with an interesting fact, or perhaps a provocative question, or even a story. Once you get this first principle of make it relevant, you move on to the second principle. And principle number 2 is to make it engaging. How can you engage students throughout the entire video? Now, I tend to ask questions. This is a technique that I use a lot because I think it helps people to think things through and gives them opportunity, empowers them, the students, a little bit. And I used that technique quite a bit last week, as you perhaps recall. So this week, I'm going to offer a different kind of technique, which is the 1-minute writing exercise. You can give your students a writing prompt and tell them to pause the video for 1 minute and write nonstop on that prompt, even if all they write is blah 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 for 1 minute. So what I'd like you to do now is to pause this video and to grab a pen and paper. Now, you could do it with a keyboard, but it does actually work better if you're holding a pen in your hand. And for 1 minute, you're going to write your response to making videos for an online course. So just write anything that comes to mind. Making videos for an online course. And I'm going to give you just a few minutes to get yourself settled. You're going to stop the video and start writing on that for a minute, and then come back to the course or to the video. For those of you who are online live, feel free to share anything that comes to mind in your chat. I threw this out as something in the middle of already delivering some content in this video. So perhaps what you've written is influenced by that content, right? So you could use this technique to reinforce a very specific point if you wanted to, as a matter of fact. And so when you have something for the students to do, in addition to listen, you have made the video engaging, which is that second principle. And now we can work on principle number 3. Principle number 3 is make it clear. And the best way to remember this is less is more. So for example, if you're using slides, which I tend to do, 1 point per slide. For example, this one right here. And exclude anything that is not directly related to the content. Another important point in making it clear is to make sure that your words go with the visuals so that there isn't a disconnect. And these are just a few ideas to keep in mind as you implement this third principle, make it clear. Moving on to the fourth principle, I want you to take a second to just think to yourself, and you could even grab a pen or use your keyboard and answer this question. What are the 3 educational principles to keep in mind when making a video for an online course? In other words, what are the 3 principles that I just discussed? And I'll give you just a minute to think that through a little bit. What are those 3 educational principles? Well, here they are. Make it relevant, make it engaging, make it clear, and then here's our 4th one as well, make it recurrent. So I did this, number 4, make it recurrent, in 2 ways today. I repeated the principle at the end of the explanation onto the next principle. So I repeated principle number 1 before I started into principle number 2, etc. So don't be afraid to repeat yourself, particularly as you're moving into a new point. And then the other way that I did this in this principle number 4 was I'm using this recall exercise for students to take this information deeper into long-term memory. And here's another recurrent example, is because I actually did this recall last time. And it is actually really one of the most important ways that you can use. It's kind of a straightforward and simple thing to do, but the act of recalling actually cements the information into our brain. There's a lot of scientific research on that to show us that that's true. So don't be afraid to ask people to recall. Hopefully, the one thing that you remember when you leave here is these things that I have said over and over again without hopefully making it too boring, which is these 4 educational principles to keep in mind when you make a video. Make it relevant, make it engaging, make it clear, and make it recurrent. This is what I'd say are the most important pieces to making an online instructional video. But we are going to talk about media production. And I'm going to go back here. And for a minute now, I'd like you to do just another little exercise before we go into media production. Take a minute to close your eyes. Take a deep, full inhale, a deep, full exhale. Soften the skin around your eyes. Breathe normally. Allow everything to just release, particularly around your eyes and the corners of your mouth. And just for a minute, I want you to consider and think about this idea of making your own video. the actual production of a video that you would do. And allow any ideas or feelings or images to just float into your mind without judging it in any way. Just allow it to come. Breathe normally. Allow those muscles to stay relaxed and still thinking, allowing yourself to dwell on this idea of making your own video. And now very slowly and gently open your eyes. And if you have a pen and paper nearby, just jot down whatever words came to mind. Images, feelings, thoughts. Doesn't have to be sentences or even phrases, just words. And if you want to use your keyboard, go ahead and do that. And we're going to return to that at the end of this. So just kind of put that off to the side. Now, for making videos, we're going to start with the issue of quality. Now, quality matters to a point. You might think that you have to hire somebody, a whole team, and that you have to get all fancy schmancy, but you really don't. Just a few basic guidelines for quality, and your instructional video will be effective. Visual clarity is one of the most important things. So no shaking cameras. If your camera your camera should be either on your computer, like mine is, the one that I'm using, or on a tripod. So no handheld iPhones, right? Also, adequate lighting. Usually a light on either side facing toward you is adequate. Where I am today, it's very sunny and very bright, and I have a lot of windows, so I'm actually just using the natural light. And then, of course, I have the challenge of not having too much glare. So I had to close one of the blinds. So you really want to think about your lighting. Now, sound clarity. If you decide to buy any equipment at all, a USB headset and mic would be the first thing to get. I'm not using one of those today, and I tend not to use them anymore. I used to use them because my old computer, the quality of the recording wasn't nearly as good as the one that I have now. I have a MacBook Pro, and so the quality is just really great. It depends on what your situation is. These things don't cost very much money, so feel free, if you're going to buy something, to buy one of these. And then the other thing to keep in mind about quality is distractions. That's a picture of my puppy, Kalima. And you want to keep all the distractions to a minimum, outside sounds, and that's why the USB headset helps a little bit. My dog tends to be my distraction. Perhaps you heard her a little earlier. She was barking. And then you'll also want to think about not being too distracted with whatever is behind you. You don't have to set up a whole set with a white background or anything like that. But just make sure that whatever is behind you is not distracting. So you'll see when I turn the video back on myself, I actually took down all the pictures behind me just so that they weren't distracting. And then lastly, what you wear, again, just make sure that it's not distracting and flashy and all that kind of stuff. Unless, of course, your video is about flashy clothing, and then, of course, you want to wear flashy clothing. So quality does matter, but on a very basic level. You just don't have to do anything fancy. And I can't emphasize this enough because I know this is the one thing that people really worry about. More importantly, preparation matters. Preparation matters far more than quality. And I'm going to talk a little bit about whether you should write a script or not. People ask me this a lot, and there are pros and cons to both approaches. Remember when I said last week that The videos should be kept short, 12 minutes at the most, and preferably no more than 10. It's so much easier to do that and make sure you get everything in that you need if you use a script. A script, however, can make you sound a little stiff and a little aloof and, might sound a little rigid. So you solve that problem by using an outline instead of a script. And that's going to help you to keep an easy conversational tone. But then you get wordy and you go astray and everything is way too long and not too clear, right? So there are trade-offs. And I have tended to use a script more often now than I used to, because I found that the editing was easier because I was on target. I knew, exactly what I was going to say. Ultimately, use whatever is best for you, but you have to prepare. Either way, script or not to script, practice, 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 and then practice some more. Here's a little story. I had a script for last week's webinar, but I got something going on here at the house, and so I didn't have an opportunity to practice nearly as much as I would have. And then this week, I had a lot more time to practice, and I bet you can hear the difference in the way that the webinar is being delivered. Now, the great instructional videos that are on TED, many of you, I'm sure, have watched many of them. This one, Jill Bolte-Taylor, My Stroke of Insight, has the second most number of views of any TED Talk. And as you can see, it's almost 18 million views. Just kind of amazing. How many times do you think the average TED presenter practices their talk before they go on that stage? Well, you might be surprised to know that it's 200 times on average. And Jill actually practiced more than 200 times. And obviously it paid off. Now, I'm not saying that you should practice 200 times. I certainly didn't practice this particular webinar or video 200 times, but practice is really key. So now you've prepared your talk and you've practiced it a lot, and there's only one more thing to worry about. Editing. Editing matters really take time. Hands down, editing is the most difficult part of making an effective instructional video by yourself. So just a few tips to make it a little less painful. Firstly, expect it will take more time than you think it should. Always give yourself lots of time for editing, and then expect that there will be more time. And if you can, do more than one take of what you're recording so that you have a range of materials to choose from for the editing. Now, when you're doing a live webinar like I am now, that's not possible, but if you can. And then lastly, always keep it very simple. You want a very simple, basic title to introduce it, a very simple, basic script at the end, slide at the end to complete it, and then the transitions should be very simple also, nothing fancy. That will just distract from the instruction. So there you have it. Media production, the things to keep in mind. Quality matters to a point. And I told you 3 main points about quality that you should keep in mind. Preparation matters lots. The more you prepare, the better it will be. And then editing matters, take time. You really have to plan that editing piece out. Don't expect that you can just do that, boom, overnight, especially if you've never used your software before. I have a MacBook Pro, so I use iMovie for my editing, and it's much easier than when I had a PC, which was many, many years ago. I was using a different kind of program, and maybe they're easier now. I can't really speak to the PC editing programs, but just give yourself a lot of time, as I say, especially if you haven't ever done it before. So there you have it. That's the, oops, that's the details on both the educational principles and the media production. So I just want to point out, as I said earlier in the script, I took the pictures down from behind me, and you can see I also closed the drape. I was just trying to make the scene a little less distracting. There's lots of quality, natural quality light here, so I don't have to worry too much about the lighting. So after this webinar, I'm going to be sending you a checklist for making fantastic videos. And I want you to do me a favor. And please, I implore you, just give it a shot. No pun intended. Well, maybe a little bit. I want you to try it. Make a video, an instructional video on any topic, anything that really seems like you want to be talking about, that you want to be teaching about. And it can be a very simple topic. Make it just about 1 or 2 minutes. And prepare, write out either an outline or a script, and shoot it, maybe shoot it twice. Do a little bit of editing, but don't worry too much about the editing. You'll see on the checklist all the things that you should concern yourself with in terms of putting it together. And then what I'd really love you to do is to send it to me. Yeah, I want you to send it to me, because I want to see that and show you that you can, in fact, make a great instructional video. It really isn't that difficult. So before, I asked you to close your eyes and to think about media production of your online videos, and then to write down anything that you thought about the images. We did that sort of guided thinking process. It wasn't really a meditation, but a guided thinking process. And so what I'd like you to do is just now to glance at anything that you jotted down and go ahead and make a comment or ask a question. Is there anything that you jotted down that I hadn't talked about? So something that you were thinking about, feeling an image or an idea or a worry that I hadn't addressed, or perhaps something that you'd just like to comment on that I did address. And I'm going to actually now open up the Q&A, and I will also open up the chat. So either one of those, feel free to just jump right in. And also, don't feel like you have to. If you're watching the recording, just take a minute now, and if something comes to mind from that exercise that you want to say to me or share with me or ask me, please feel free to send me an email. Great. Okay, so there are 2 quick announcements, fabulous announcements of things. Firstly, next week we're having a great webinar, because it's going to be a time for you to talk with somebody who just recently, for the first time ever, developed, launched, and is teaching her first online class. Julia Perring is a wonderful yoga teacher, and she's teaching a class for e-yoga studies. And she's going to share with you her experience, and then you're going to have lots of opportunities to talk with her and to ask her questions, and a great conversation. I'm very excited about that. And then the last announcement that I have is that my class, which is creating online courses that matter, is going to be opening for enrollment. Is actually open for enrollment today. It's running from November 1st to December 12th. It's 7 weeks. And in that 7 weeks time, at the end, you will have a full package of the structure for your online course. So just think about this for a minute. By the end of this academic year, by the end of this calendar year, you will have all that you need to be able to launch an online course. And you'll be able to run it in the new year, starting in January. Now remember that January, from a marketing perspective, is a great time to launch a new program. So I really encourage you to look at and think about this class. I'm going to send you the link for the more information on it. And then again, I encourage you to talk to me and ask me any questions that you might have. And so with that, I am going to say goodbye for today, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And I look forward to seeing those videos that you're going to make. And I'm just now going to be sending you to the page with that information, and I would love to hear from you. Take care.